Alright, we're now on lesson number 6 for the Stylized Game Weapons class. In this lesson, we will retopologize this original low-poly base mesh by utilizing those decimated sculpt meshes that we created in the previous lesson. To do this, we will import a decimated mesh in one at a time and apply it to a reference layer so that we can easily interact with the low polygon base mesh while still using the decimated mesh as a guide. As you can see here, we are starting off with that original low poly base mesh before going into ZBrush, and this is what we created at the beginning of the class. And then to start off, we are actually going to go ahead and delete half of this model because, if you remember, this entire weapon model will remain symmetrical along the Z-axis. And in addition to this, having the other side visible while we create the retopo might just end up interfering with our retopo process. So I will hit spacebar, go to the right-hand view. I will next also go ahead and combine all these objects to make it easy for me to then just kind of delete one half. I will then go to face, and then kind of go ahead and try to get close to that middle axis, that middle line. Hit backspace. See that I'm going to have to go in a little bit. Zoom in a little bit to make sure that all of those edges are deleted. And that should be good. So now I can just basically separate out this model again. So I will go to Mesh, Separate, and then load up the first decimated piece, and then just kind of retopo this asset one piece at a time. And so the first piece I will import will be the topstone piece. So I'll go to File, Import. I will go ahead and find Decimated, go with the topstone decimated. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to take this decimated top stone and I want to apply it to a reference layer. So I'm going to click on this icon right here, which is going to add that mesh I just hit, the decimated mesh, in as its own layer. I'm going to click on this little section right here twice to make it a reference. And now I can only select the low-poly base mesh, which would be perfect for creating the retopo. Now I know originally I was thinking that I wouldn't need to capture this large bevel right here, but now that I'm seeing this decimated mesh next to the low poly, I believe it will look a lot better if I go ahead, take that extra step, and capture these large bevels right here. Part of the reason behind this is that this main large focus sort of piece of the mesh, or this large kind of piece right here, it's such a focus of the entire asset. And in addition to that, this bevel also kind of just separates these two different materials out. Also, I'm pretty confident that the rest of this piece, when I do the retopo, that I'm gonna have enough budget in terms of poly count to sort of go ahead and create this bevel right here. So the other thing to consider is that this large bevel is also symmetrical all the way around. It's symmetrical both Z-axis and X-axis. So to make this go by even quicker, what I can do is I can delete these faces right here. And I think it's back view. Yeah, it's back view for this one. And I just go to back view. And what I'm going to do for this is use a couple different tools. I'm going to use both the cut faces tool and the multi-cut tool. So to use this, I can go to Mesh Tools, Cut Faces tool. First thing you have the Object Selected. So Object Selected, Mesh Tools, Cut Faces tool. And with this, I'm basically just going to kind of almost like trace over these major lines right here, major edges, like that, and like this. And now when I'm doing this, I am creating some extra, definitely unneeded edges, but I can then later on go ahead and combine, merge some of these edges together, or delete some of these edges, and it should be a problem. So now I have, looks like I've got all these edges captured. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and just move this vertex into position. And again, because I only have the back face selected, I'm not moving this in the Z-axis. I'm only moving this in the, looks like the Y and the X. Another thing is, like right here, I'm going to go ahead and with V held down, I'm going to go ahead and snap it to that other vertex. Go ahead, just make sure you got V held down. go to Edit Mesh, Merge Components. I should merge those two together like so. This piece right here, I definitely don't need this invert. So again, I could have either deleted that edge or I could have just brought that up. For this one down here, actually I'm going to go ahead and merge this down here because I'm going to need that extra edge. This piece, I'm going to need this line to be captured right there at the bevel, so I'm going to merge this down right there. Let's get merged up. Actually, I can do this. I can merge this down here, merge this together. Let me go ahead and merge some of these vertices. Go to Edge, and I can just go ahead and delete that. So I basically just kind of keep continuing this process to finish this up right here. I keep merging. I always start with the Cut Faces tool. Sometimes I need to use the Multi-Cut Faces tool as well. Merge vertices when I can. Just kind of clean it up a little bit. But yeah, so you get the general idea. So after that, all I really need to do once that bevel is sort of created, I can then take this object right here. I can hit Control D to duplicate, and then I can do -1 the x-axis. I can go ahead and mesh, combine, and do Edit Mesh, Merge Components. And now, obviously when you're doing this yourself, if you ever have an instance where you can work on one quarter piece at a time, definitely make sure that one quarter piece is clean first before you kind of duplicate it over. Because right now, I would have been creating extra work for myself if I have to clean up both sides at once. But in the interest of time, I went ahead and just merged that over. And now what I'm going to do is kind of show you how I do these major cuts right here. So again, I can start off with the Cut Faces tool. Have that line up roughly like that. I'm also going to need a cut right here. And again, if I want, I can, if it's getting maybe a little too busy, what I could do instead, I'm going to go ahead and undo that. I can go to Multi-Cut tool. I can kind of just select right here, hit Enter. Again, I can just kind of, it's basically the same thing, it's just now I'm not creating extra edges. Sort of, whatever works best for you. I kind of tend to fluctuate between the both of them, depending on the situation. Again, the first thing I'm going to do is going to capture slash cut these other kind of traces over the other ones. And then take some of these other vertices, merge them where I can. The other thing at this point is I'm not worried necessarily too much about the topology, because what I end up doing usually is I'll capture the major form or the major silhouette first, and then I'll kind of go in and maybe I'll create new cuts, delete some edges, merge them together where needed, and I'll kind of keep doing this until I have a flow of topology that kind of makes more sense. And another kind of note about that as well is finding the correct topology can kind of at times maybe seem like a little bit of trial and error. You can have something that looks like fairly clean topology, but then maybe when you go ahead and bake out some of the neural maps, which we will definitely go over in upcoming lessons, but when you go ahead and bake out those maps, you might find that the neural map is kind of getting a little wonky in areas. Like there's some weird sort of values if you check it out in Marmoset or 3D Go, something like that. Sometimes that can definitely be fixed by just slightly changing the topology. By doing something simple as instead of having, this is an n-gon, but instead of having sort of an edge go a certain way, having it go a different way, things like that can sometimes make a difference. The other thing is in upcoming lessons I'll go over things such as like triangulation, and making sure you have sort of edges, supporting edges to make sure that certain edges don't get too like wavy kind of thing. But this basically shows you how my process for that. Now, the other thing is that obviously I was just doing that retopo from one sort of side. I was only doing the y-axis and the x-axis. So now we just need to move this stuff back in the z-axis. And then basically, it's all in position. So if I just move that a bit, you'll see that fairly quickly. This is looking good. So, there's definitely some cleanup that needs to be done, but that's starting to definitely capture that level. And again here, maybe I want to move this back a little bit, move this forward a little bit, then move this a little forward, and so. So that's basically the basic process that I did for all the stones at least. Now for some of these cylinder shapes, a couple things I want to point out. You'll notice that in this original sort of base mesh shape that we use for the sculpt, there are definitely way too many faces needed for the low polygon base mesh. It was nice for the sculpt, but at this point, we don't need that many faces to capture the normal map, and it just sort of it's unneeded, especially if you have like a low budget, they have a low poly count restriction kind of thing. So you kind of want to find a sweet spot. You don't want sort of, especially for cylinders, you don't want a cylinder to be too high, but you don't want necessarily be too low. If it's too low, you'll notice that in your normal map bakes, along edges such as like right up here, or right down here, or right over there, you'll start getting kind of like wavy. And now it kind of depends. Sometimes it'll look wavy, but then when you test it out in Marmoset or 3D Code, it's actually not that bad. But it kind of depends. How big is that certain sort of particular mesh? Is it really big in comparison to the entire weapon? If it's really big, you might want to go ahead and add in a couple more faces just to make sure that from many different angles that those edges are retained. But actually, because I know these cylinder sections of the mesh aren't really that large, really they don't take up too much sort of visual real estate, I can make it fairly low. So what I'm going to do is actually, first I'm going to import this piece right here, which I know is the diamond class. But it's the diamond class on top, diamond class. There we go. So again, select that first. Although I don't think I did object selected. And select the object. You get reference there. There we go. I'm going to create a cylinder. And now, the reason why I'm creating a new cylinder is I'm going to show you this kind of really easy way to change the subdivision count of the cylinder. All you need to do is click right here in Polycylinder. You see something that says subdivision axis. If I click on this and then use the middle mouse button, click on this and then use the middle mouse button, you can change the amount. And now, I went ahead and did something with like subdivision axis of 8. I thought, 8 is pretty darn low, but it still basically does a cylinder shape. From most angles, it kind of looks like a cylinder, especially if I kind of go ahead and do normals, unlock normals, soften edge, and it looks like a cylinder. So 8 should be fine, but definitely feel free to do more if it's needed for your weapon in particular. But then besides that, all you really do is just like in some of the earlier lessons, I select some of these edges, I do a bevel, and then I just kind of scale it into position. That's all you need to do for that. So I'm going to go ahead and actually load up the final retopo right now, which is final. Just a couple of things I kind of want to point out. So you can see the final mesh right here. I decided to alter some of the edges in the end to have somewhat of like a cleaner flow. And again, if something still looks a little off in the in the final, or when you're baking it, you can just kind of go back and tweak some of how it's flowing a little bit. It's not too hard. A couple other things. Again, this cylinder piece. In the end, I'm actually going to UV only this 1/4, so I can actually just kind of go ahead and delete these pieces right there. Because in the next phase, where we go ahead and retopo, the next lesson, I'm only going to need this one top piece, and then I'm going to UV this, I'm going to bake it, and then once that's all kind of done, I'm just going to sort of duplicate this down 3 more times, and then kind of merge it together, and it should look perfect for what we need. Another thing is these bottom pieces right here, which I have on a reference layer. Or actually, no, I don't even have a reference layer right now, but these bottom pieces right here, I'm not going to need to actually UV these because I can just UV these top pieces right here, and then once those are all UV'd out and I've done the bake and everything like that, um, I can then just duplicate those pieces, maybe even duplicate it and mirror it in the y-axis, and then reposition it and rescale a little bit, and it should look good for what we need. So it'll save a lot of space in our UV map, and it'll save some time. So these pieces right here, those are not really needed. I mean, I might need to bring those back at some point as sort of like a reference for the size that they're needed, but for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Another thing to consider, I captured this major bevel, but you might have noticed in the scope there was another sort of crack right there. The main thing to consider is when you're doing the retopo, try to capture all the main sort of silhouette shapes. So based off the concept or based off the sculpt, what are those main sort of defining silhouette sort of cracks and forms? Definitely try to capture those. And then depending on how much poly count you have left, you can capture some more if needed. But yeah, that's basically that. Another thing I wanted to also show you really quickly is that you'll notice that some of these faces on top I went ahead and deleted. So definitely we want to be as efficient as possible and definitely not use any polys where we don't need it, so that we can use some of those polys that we didn't need, that we didn't need in some of these areas that are sort of high detail. That we really want to have the silhouette kind of look pretty nice. So wherever a face is not going to be seen in a model, you can go ahead and delete that face. So I believe, there's definitely a couple areas, especially in the cylinder right here, that top face, I went ahead and deleted that. In this middle handle connector, I deleted both the bottom face and the top face. And so really I just kind of kept going through, and I found out, once I had the entire piece sort of combined, I found out which faces are not needed, and I went ahead and deleted those. So yeah, but that is the retopo. We are definitely now ready to start UVing this piece. So in the next lesson, which will be lesson 7, we will start to do the UV. Again, we won't need this entire model, so we can do sort of half of it like we did at the beginning of this lesson. But yeah, we will start that off in the next lesson. UV it out. I'll go over UV space, the kind of things you need to think about in terms of getting enough real estate for your texture map, things like that. So stay tuned to the next lesson.